Today, we are going to be getting into average draft position gaps on Sleeper, ESPN, and Yahoo. So depending on which platform you're drafting on, we always stress that it's important to know where players might get drafted based on the rankings and ADP per site. So we've identified some players that we like, some players that we don't like based on their draft positions on these different sites. The first player that we're going to look at is Bo Nix. So we both agree that the quarterback 7 that he's being ranked at on Sleeper is very aggressive, and he's honestly being ranked that way pretty much everywhere. So he's more of a consensus pick here, but overall, I just think we've made the point quite a bit on Bo Nix. You can see across the board, right, that 3,700 yards, 29 touchdowns, and 430 yards with 4 rushing touchdowns. The numbers look really good. He was QB7 last year, but I'm just afraid that it didn't come very consistently. So, it's hard for me to project somebody that was rushing a lot early, and then that kind of disappeared later in the year, and then it came back a little bit. But this stretch just makes me nervous about his rushing, and a lot of his production late in the season was just on so many passing touchdowns.
Yeah, and I know he finished QB7, but he went off week 18 when not every quarterback even played. So if you remove that, he would have been the QB9. And my issue with Nix, among many other things, is 30% of his throws last season were at or behind the line of scrimmage, which was kind of his calling card at Oregon, to be honest. And he had 7 passing touchdowns on throws that didn't go past the line of scrimmage, which was top in the NFL. So a lot of that was a little bit fluky. They were ineffective on the ground entirely. And what do? Drafted RJ Harvey, they bring in J.K. Dobbins. So if this team is, not going to be having other teams score a lot of points against them, and they're going to be running the ball a lot better, I think that's going to be more of the blueprint. And I just struggle. We look at last year when CJ Stroud was coming off of a great rookie season and we were all pushing him up very high, and then he had a sophomore regression. I just kind of feel similarly. Whereas, I'd much rather put my faith in someone like Jared Goff, who finished not only higher than Bo Nix last year, but he's coming off 3 straight seasons of top 10 fantasy. So I'm not a Bo Nix guy. I'm not really going to get him in any leagues, but the QB7 is just way too rich for my blood.
And that was a great segue into our next player, who is Jared Goff here, right? So you can see that, the top 10 finishes that you mentioned here, including 6th last year. And obviously last year he was in a dome his first 15 games, so that's super advantageous for him. And Ben Johnson is gone, so I understand if you're a little bit nervous about him, but the offense is still, or the offensive weapons are all still there. And I really think that he should be able to repeat relatively similar numbers, maybe a little bit less touchdowns, but on Sleeper, he's currently going as QB14, and that's just way too low in my opinion, especially in Superflex, right? If you're drafting for 1 quarterback leagues, okay, fine. I can get that Goff is a little bit boring, doesn't necessarily have that big time upside, but from a Superflex perspective, the high floor and the certainty that you're getting, top 12, top 10 quarterback is just too much for me to pass up. I have him ranked as my QB8. I'm going to be all over him at QB14, and I'm kind of going to build my strategy around trying to get him a round or 2 after I would even be willing to take him. So really like Jared Goff this year. Definitely somebody I think you should be targeting in your Superflex drafts.
Yeah, and even if they're not going to score the most points in the NFL, again, they're still projected to be a top 5 scoring offense. And to me, it's okay, maybe they're a little bit less dominant, which leads to a little bit less of David Montgomery at the end of the games. Maybe they're in a few more shootouts where they're going to have to put it on Goff's shoulders.
Next player is Dak Prescott. So he is QB17 in Sleeper rankings, and that's just way too low. I mean, again, it's maybe why I've been urging everybody to slow play quarterback, because guys that I really like are so low ranked on Sleeper. And Dak, another guy, I just moved him down to 12, but I kind of want to move him back up to 10 or 9 even. I just really have a lot of faith that he's going to be the focal point of the offense, that they're going to be throwing a lot. They brought in George Pickens to help him down the field, possibly open up additional efficiency for CeeDee Lamb. And their running game is terrible. I mean, they brought in Javonte Williams and they have Jalen Blue, but I just don't think that they're going to be able to run the ball very effectively. And I think a lot of the offense is going to hinge on Dak.
Yeah, and I think if Jaden Blue does emerge and carves out a nice role on this offense, he's kind of more of an electric playmaker, similar to an RJ Harvey type, who's going to be very involved in the passing game. So I think that could be even more cheat yardage for Dak as well. And just year over year, I mean, you see it, the years that he's healthy, it's QB3, QB8, QB2, QB14. And then, those other years he's been injured. But we just have a long history of him being awesome. And I think George Pickens, the fact that we're hearing everything is positive around him isn't always necessarily the case. So I'm really excited about that addition as well.
Yeah, definitely. And one of those years he got hurt, that was that 2020 year where he only played 5 games and he was on pace for 6,500 yards or whatever. I mean, he in 5 games he had 1,850. Like, that's insane. Like, he definitely has the ability to kind of be super high upside, and I feel like he's not drafted that way at all.
That's like a whole season for Justin Fields.
Which is a great segue going into Fields here now. So, and he's being drafted at QB19 on Sleeper, which I feel like is even lower than we would expect for him too. Now, this one might be a hard sell at this point in time in the offseason, because the reporting that just came out about his first 3 days of practice has been terrible. Like, he has been barely completing any passes over the last 3 practices. It's been 35% completion percentage with 6 interceptions. And so obviously that's really hard to stomach, but hopefully it's just growing pains and that he's going to be at least half decent through the air, because we're not drafting him to be good as a passer. We're drafting him because he can be unreal on the ground. So, right, he's got that 1,100-yard rushing season. And if he does get the opportunity to start for 17 games, I think 1,000 yards is virtually a lock from him at the quarterback position. And with that level of upside on the ground, I just think it's going to be really hard for him to not finish in the top 12.
And some people are pushing him up to QB6, QB7, QB8. And I think the most important thing to think about when you are seeing those rankings is just know you're not only your league size, but that's more if you're in a 1 QB league where you can just grab Brock Purdy late. But in Superflex, this is the type of guy that scares me quite a bit. So my ranking is definitely closer to sleepers, but still, even QB19 is a little too rough.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of how I feel. I have him at QB14, and so at 19 it starts to feel like a value. Like, if you're in round 8 or 9 of your 10-team Superflex leagues and this is the quarterback that you're getting as your second option, that's when I'm okay with it, right? Just a little bit of urgency to get that third quarterback. Maybe you lock in a Geno Smith or a Sam Darnold just to make sure. But if you're getting that level of upside that late in your drafts, then that's what I'm okay with it. Now we go down to Bucky Irving. So he is going running back 7 on Sleeper. And I think that's a little bit rich for both of our blood, unfortunately. Obviously, if the workload increases, he could justify that position, no problem. I'm just for sure worried that, he's not going to get a ton more work through the air or on the ground because of Rachaad White, who's still there, right? And all of the reports on Bucky are going to be positives. You're not going to find negative reports on Bucky. It's just the 7th overall running back in the second round is just something that I really have trouble justifying, ahead of Ashton Genty or ahead of Devon Achane or ahead of Josh Jacobs, or Jonathan Taylor. Like, that tier of guys, I just can't pick Bucky ahead of, not yet. Maybe I'll feel better about it next year after he, goes for 315 touches, but he hasn't got anywhere close to that yet. And I am just a little bit worried about it. Again, day 3 running back paying off this type of draft price 1 year in.
Yeah, I want to see what the run scheme looks like after Liam Cohen, right? Like, Bucky had 5.4 yards per carry. He was hyper efficient, but if you dig a little bit deeper, like Rachaad White, who's not a very efficient runner, had the highest yards per carry of his career. You look at Sean Tucker, who showed out in flashes. He was over 6 yards per attempt on 50 carries. So I think it's just one of those things where I'm just going to let someone else take him and just, root for the player that I enjoy, because it was, fun being in on Bucky last year. And now it's like he has this massive cult following that I feel like I'm on the outside of.
The cult following is very entertaining to see.
Oh yeah.
But it's just from fantasy perspective or from the joking, and it's when you have the 101 in drafts, and it's Jamar Chase over here. And then somebody fiending for Bucky Irving. It's okay, I mean, we're not doing that, but he is getting pushed up quite a bit. And I understand from an efficiency and passing the eye test and the whole deal. And if he does get additional work, he probably will be worth a top 10 pick at running back, but not necessarily something that I think is a lock. Going on to the next guy is Quinshon Judkins. So he has not been dropped by Sleeper yet in the rankings. And I think that's a huge mistake to not take care of something like this immediately. I currently have him ranked at running back 30, and I don't feel very good about that ranking. I feel like there's, he still has to sign his contract. He's not in camp. There's probably an impending suspension. So I don't know. I'm feeling much better about Dylan Sampson currently, honestly. Getting him super late. But I just want to highlight this. If you're drafting now and you learn nothing else from this video on Sleeper, do not draft Quinshon Judkins where he shows up. He is showing up like at 75th overall or something like that. Don't fall into that trap. You got to make sure that you drop him on your boards.
The only thing I'll add to that is Sleeper literally has one job, and it's a platform for things like this, and they're not doing it.
Marvin Harrison Jr. is showing up as wide receiver 12 on Sleeper, and that's just way too rich for both of our bloods. I think he's more of a top 20 wide receiver, and obviously he could pay off the 12 draft price. That's kind of where he was going, or even higher last year. Historically speaking, had a solid rookie season, but compared to the other receivers in the class, he just was lacking so much and left so much to be desired. So he put on some weight, and hopefully he's better over the middle of the field. He's been getting the unguardable tag in camp, and that's something that Brian Thomas got last year, which that could foreshadow good things. Now, I will say, to my dismay, when I saw the actual clips themselves, it was boundary throws still, right? That he was catching back shoulder boundary throws, or he went deep down the field and made kind of like an acrobatic catch and fell. And it's like, that's not the type of play that I want to be seeing as a hype. Like, we know he can do that, right? That was his role last year. I want to see him open up the route tree. I want to see him have a day where he's heavily targeted. I don't want to see a day where it's just more launching down the sidelines, because I personally have no faith in Kyler Murray's ability to deliver balls like that very consistently. So, I do hope to see that his route tree kind of continues to grow through camp.
Yeah, I mean, at wide receiver 12, I thought I was aggressive ranking him at wide receiver 16. And I know wide receiver 12 is kind of that big time gray area where no one can seemingly figure out how to rank. But, last year he scored 8 touchdowns, which is good, right? But he was still the wide receiver 30. So that's just kind of extremely worrisome.
Yeah. So again, you're drafting on Sleeper. I would definitely, cool on Marvin Harrison. He's going to show up at 33 overall, and it's going to be tempting to grab him, but I'd wait a round plus before really considering him strongly. Next guy up is Tyreek Hill. I know this one was a little bit of an trying to see if it was necessarily that big of a gap, but you just mentioned the gray area at 12. And the reason I wanted to include him is because I have him at 12, and he's currently going at 17 on Sleeper. So he's going probably 18 to 20 picks overall behind where I would be willing to take him. So wanted to just highlight that here. I do think last year was a little bit more of a fluke, and that he could still get back to being an elite producer if they do go back to the offense that they were running before Tua's concussion last year. So if they do let him eat a little bit more down the field, I think he could go right back to being the player he was. Now, there's some weird stuff going on in training camp. Like he said, Achane shouldn't be the goal line back. And then Tua said he kind of has to earn the team's trust back and all that stuff. I don't know. That all feels like weird, like stuff that we're going to forget by week 3, especially if he goes out and has 110 yards and a touchdown in week 1. And obviously Waddle is going to look great with them removing Jonnu from the offense. I can't imagine that those targets aren't getting funneled directly to Waddle in camp. And, so I think that's much more of a Waddle specific thing than a Tyreek Hill specific thing. So again, I'm going to continue to draft Hill pretty aggressively here.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of have him ranked where Sleeper does. He just scares me. And I've been talking about the vibes thing all off season. I foresee a chance that we see an Antonio Brown style retirement at some point in the season from Hill. I just think he's a ticking time bomb. God. So I don't know. We'll see, but
I think if the Dolphins thought that even in the slightest, that they would have traded him, because they had opportunities this offseason to trade him, and they didn't. And I get that he was like, "Oh, I want out of here" right after they lost their last game last year. But I don't know, whatever. I think He's hopefully got it a little bit more together than Antonio Brown did at the end of his career. Next guy up is Cortland Sutton on Sleeper. He's going as wide receiver 28, and we're getting a consistent, for as much as we both don't like Bo Nix, we still have him ranked 13th among quarterbacks. And Cortland Sutton is going to benefit from having the consistency right from the beginning of the season, and he's going to benefit from the offense being better this year than it was last year. And ranking him at 28 makes virtually no sense to me. I mean, this legitimately might be the best situation that he's ever played in. And, he's just coming off a season where he was 15th. And even when he was 15th, we can look and see the inconsistency at the beginning of the year, right? It's not like he really scored a ton. He put up a goose egg in week 7. Like, he was on waiver wires in week 8 last year, and then just completely broke out in the second half of the year. So I would be very hesitant to pass on Cortland Sutton and dismiss him because I really think that this is going to be his best situation. He's going to be as consistent as he's ever been. He is the alpha on this team, and I'm really actually very excited to draft him if you can get him around 6 or 7.
There's a lot of noise with Denver's wide receiver 2 through 5 or 6, but there's no doubting that he's the top dog.
Last guy on Sleeper we're going to highlight is David Njoku. So he's going as tight end 11, and he's, again, one of those guys that I feel like I'm centering my tight end strategy on Sleeper, similar to Goff, because he goes so late. There's so many other names in front of him, and I have him ranked as tight end 5. So I just think, especially with Joe Flacco, we already know what he looks like with Flacco. If he doesn't pan out after that, if Dylan Gabriel is horrible or if Shedeur Sanders is horrible and you need to move on, fine. But until then, I think he's going to be locked in as a top 5 guy. I think he could push for top 3. And it's somebody that I just want in my lineup for sure.
And the Browns are playing the Bengals week 1, and we're going to look at tight end rankings, and Njoku is going to be ranked anywhere from tight end 4 to tight end 6.
First player on ESPN and only quarterback we'll talk about is Drake Maye. He is getting absolutely buried at quarterback 19, and I know you couldn't disagree more, so maybe I'll tee it up and just let you go off on ESPN's rankings. I feel like they're always just way off on one quarterback.
I know. I think last year they had Goff in like the mid-20s or something stupid.
They had him at 20.
Yeah, and it's like why even make rankings at that point? But with Drake Maye at QB19, it's just like, I mean, come on, man. Like, we saw what he was in that small sample size. They make improvements around him at the offensive line, at the coaching staff, at the running back position, at the wide receiver position. And I originally had him as QB9, and that was kind of, early pre-draft stuff. And now I've moved him down to QB12, which I think is still a little bit aggressive. But with him, he's just such an elite rusher and such an elite scrambler, and he did all of that on not having any design runs called for him. And now with the new OC, he obviously has a history of doing that with Cam Newton, as well as, assuming he develops even more as a passer. I thought he looked really good as a passer. Diggs looks healthy. I think we have some high hopes Kyle Williams can start to work in as the season goes on. So he's, again, just a very heavy target of mine. And, I do have one ESPN league still, so I'm going to probably just wait until the last round and take this guy.
Yeah, and it's crazy too. Like the offensive line, I think you touched on, but the offensive line is way better in front of him too. I mean, this is a prospect that they drafted with the intention of not having him play the first year because the weapons were atrocious and the offensive line was atrocious. So it's like, wait, maybe he gets the last few games of the year type of thing, kind of like a red shirt season. And you see in the player card, he ended up playing 13 games. And he absolutely looked the part. I mean, he was completely set up to fail, and he didn't entirely fail. So I'm all in on Drake Maye as well. I mean, I don't have him ranked quite as aggressively as you. I think I'm a quarterback 15, but in a dynasty league, it's just like I'm all over him. QB6, I feel like, once he gets even further along and more weapons, that New England should be back on the map because I really believe in this kid. Next guy up is Omarion Hampton. Another rookie running back here, right? And I feel like he's been flying up draft boards recently because of Najee, and ESPN hasn't caught up yet. So he's at running back 18. And the reason I wanted to highlight him is that's a tier break below where we currently have him. I have him at running back 14 right now. With the itch to move him over James Cook, because I feel like if I'm on the clock, I'm going to end up taking Hampton over Cook. I just really think that he's going to be a star right there. He's getting worked in the passing game. He's getting heavy workload early. Greg Roman is talking about using him like Derrick Henry. So I think the sky's the limit for this kid, and make sure that, if he's going to fall all the way to running back 18, that you're scooping up as many shares of him as you can get.
Underline him, star him, circle him, whatever you want to do. But in an ESPN draft, this should be a very much a focal point.
And next guy up is another rookie running back as well, RJ Harvey, going at running back 27. So I think maybe ESPN reacted a little bit too harshly to the J.K. Dobbins signing. Maybe they think he's going to be significantly better early in the year and adjusted their overall rankings and overall projections accordingly. But I do think the ability for Harvey to, get off to maybe a little bit slower start because Dobbins is going to be the one for the first few weeks and then kind of take over the second half of the year is the reason why you would want to get in on him. So, even if his overall numbers look a little bit lower, I think as the season goes on, I expect nothing but upside from him. So I'm in on him. He's a good pass catcher. He's an explosive runner. And so, if he's getting anywhere in that 12 to 15 touch range, I think he can be productive and worth a start in your fantasy leagues.
Yeah, and most ESPN leagues are PPR anyway, so this is the type of guy that you're going to want to push up regardless.
Moving over to the wide receivers now, it brings warmth to my heart to get to talk about Ladd McConkey again. So if you're out there, you obviously know we're Charger fans, and if you're new here and didn't know that, we love our Chargers, and Ladd is going 13th on ESPN. I have him at wide receiver 10. Again, not a huge gap, but the main point here is that there's a tier. There's like a major tier break between Ladd at 10 or 11, right? And then the next guy at 12. And he's going after that when we have Ladd in the tier above that. So if if he sneaks below Tyreek Hill or, anybody else other than that Drake London, AJ Brown tier, definitely be looking to aggressively draft Ladd McConkey at that point in your drafts.
Yeah, when we were preparing for this, we've talked in every mock draft that we've done, or at least, I've said specifically that I don't want to leave any draft without a top 11 wide receiver. And I saw him at 13. I was like, oh my gosh, can I just draft on ESPN now?
Next guy up is Tet McMillan. So you're starting to notice a trend on ESPN. They don't rank rookies aggressively enough. And, there's a potential here for huge volume. And I think in PPR leagues, especially even half point PPR leagues, he's definitely somebody that should be inside the top 30 and, even pushing the top 25 just because he's going to be the number one. He was just the 8th overall pick. He's got nothing but glowing reports out of camp. And I really think that he's going to take over as the huge volume in this offense. So, and there is fantasy goodness to be had in the Panthers offense. Even last year, Deontay Johnson early in the year was looked at as like a top 15 and sometimes even top 10 wide receiver on any given week. And then Adam Thielen came in and was looked at as like a top 25 wide receiver as the number one over the last 4 or 5 weeks of the season. So if McMillan hits the ground running in that role to start the year and is getting a ton of volume, he's going to be at least wide receiver 25. So getting him down at 33, I think, is a huge value. I wish we were drafting on more platforms where that's where he went because he goes inside the top 60 overall on Sleeper, which is much more in line with where I think he belongs.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen Bryce Young just likes to lock on to one target, and assuming he continues to grow and develop, we know their offensive line is good. We know they throw the ball a ton. We know they're not going to be shutting teams out defensively. So I think he's in for a really big season. I think I have him as my wide receiver 24. So I'm very high on him. And this was a guy that Young told the GM and Dave Canales that they should target in the draft, and they did.
Back to running back here briefly and look at Chase Brown. So he's currently going as running back 13. And I think that's at least a little bit of consensus amongst some experts, so I think anybody that realizes how great he was at the back half of the year is been starting to rank him more aggressively, especially after Zach Moss got released. I have him at 9, and I just think that there's nothing but upside here. I mean, he's starting to turn into the darling for this type of video, I feel like. So, almost obligatory inclusion here.
Yeah, nothing's changed really. I mean, the defense is going to be bad and the offense is going to be great, and they keep talking up Chase Brown, and they didn't do anything to replace him.
Another running back here, Aaron Jones, right? So sense another trend, right? They don't aggressively rank their rookies enough, right? And then they're ranking their vets way too aggressively. Aaron Jones up at running back 23. I get liking Aaron Jones. I am the Aaron Jones guy. I was all over him last year too when they didn't have any competition there, but it's too much to ignore the fact that they brought in Jordan Mason and they paid him, right? I mean, it's not that this isn't like I don't like Aaron Jones. I think he's great. And I think, at running back 28 or 29 that he kind of presents a pretty solid value at that point. But I'm not aggressively ranking him over Travion Henderson. I'm not aggressively ranking him over James Conner or David Montgomery or Caleb Johnson. Like, those guys, I think, are just all significantly tiered above him, like very clearly tiered above him. So the fact that he's getting ranked up there above some of those guys on ESPN just isn't something I can buy into. I'd probably get none of him if he's going to go at running back 23. And then we got 3 more receivers for you here. So the first one is Brian Thomas. And this one is another tier-based thing, right? Up top, it's kind of hard to say that you disagree with a specific ranking, but when somebody's dropped a tier, that's when it becomes a bigger problem. So he's wide receiver 9, and he's getting ranked outside the top 8, that's where like we have a hard tier. So, I have him at 6, so seeing him at 9 is just like a gift, honestly. Again, make sure that if he is the one that does fall in your ESPN drafts, that you're all over it.
And their offense should take a step forward, because don't forget they played almost half the season with Mac Jones.
Another poster child for a video like this is Zay Flowers. I feel like he's getting ranked in like the 24, 25 range, and I feel like it's almost unanimous that everybody thinks that that's way too high. You might look up at the end of the year and that's where he finishes, but his volatility and, the lack of reliability almost causes you to lose weeks sometimes.
3 games with 1 catch, 2 games with 2 catches, 2 games with 3 catches, and 0 games over 9 catches. And this was an offense that scored over 30 points per game. Lamar threw for 41 touchdowns. It was the best passing year of his career. Yet Zay Flowers, who is the number 1, finished as the wide receiver 36 on a points per game basis. And he just doesn't get targeted in the red zone, in the end zone. And now they add in DeAndre Hopkins, who I don't think is necessarily going to be a volume monster, but I think in those red zone packages, we might not even see Zay Flowers on the field. So he's just kind of a total avoid for me.
Last guy to take advantage of on ESPN is Chris Olave. So he's going as wide receiver 38, and I get it. Okay, the Saints are terrible on offense. It's kind of just avoid the whole situation, but wide receiver 38 is almost disrespectful for somebody this good. If Shuck or Rattler even have any sort of semblance of quality play whatsoever, he's going to smash that ADP if he stays healthy. And so, if it's a concussion thing that you're worried about, okay, maybe, but you just look at his first 2 seasons, and there's just so few receivers that start their careers with 1,050 and then 1,100 yards. He got hurt last year. Not a good situation, just didn't rush him back. I think he could get back on track, even if it's not over 1,000 yards, because of how bad the offense is. I think 80 catches, 900 yards, and 5 touchdowns is in the realm of possibility, or even should be expected if he plays every game. And that is not wide receiver 38. I mean, that's going to play much more like wide receiver, 27 to 30. And I think that's where he should be going.
Yeah, target talented players late.
All right, and last we're going to go down to Yahoo. So we're going to start with Aaron Rodgers. So obviously long decorated career here, but overall we just can't condone quarterback 19. It's just way too strong. And honestly, looking at Yahoo's quarterback rankings, it was rough to look at past the top 10 or 12. Like it honestly looked like a 4-year-old put together the list. So if anybody at Yahoo is listening, you need to update your quarterback rankings. They had Shedeur Sanders at 20, who I didn't even dignify that with a section on this video other than just mentioning it here. So this just felt like one of the obvious ones. I was like, okay, literally not a single person is going to do that. So just have to highlight that, Aaron Rodgers is definitely a QB3, even in your Superflex leagues. Next guy up is Trevor Lawrence. And this one pains me to have to include because you guys know I'm not the Trevor Lawrence guy, but they have him at quarterback 30. And if you're playing in Superflex and you're on Yahoo and he's at quarterback 30 and nobody realizes it, you're in round 11 of your drafts and he's still there. Like that's definitely worth taking a shot on. I've softened on my Lawrence stance throughout this offseason just because I do like the weapons so much. And so I have him at quarterback 21, just outside of starting range in a 10-team league, but well within starting range of 12-team leagues. Unfortunately, I have to talk positively about Trevor Lawrence because Yahoo's rankings are so bad. Let's move into the running backs on Yahoo now. So we've got Devon Achane going as running back 9. You guys know I love Achane. I do have him at running back 5. I did recently move him down one spot behind Christian McCaffrey. I'm still struggling with that ranking. I feel like that's becoming a mini tier for me. But running back 9 is disrespectful in my opinion, right? He finished as number 5 last year despite Tua missing all of that time. And if Tua doesn't miss time, or even if he does, because their backup quarterback situation is so much better this year with Zach Wilson and with Quinn Ewers, I think they can help float his value better than anybody that was there last year. And so I just think he has too much receiving volume to fail.
Yeah, if you hear Zach Wilson's name and your stomach hurts, just remember that he was at least able to support Breece Hall in terms of pass catching. So that's kind of the silver lining there.
And good transition into Breece Hall. So you wanna talk about Breece Hall?
I mean, he's RB14 on Yahoo. I have him RB17. So I get it. Not necessarily egregious. We know he's very talented, but my issue with him is kind of twofold. I don't necessarily think Justin Fields is going to dump it off to him, and I don't think this team is going to score a lot of points. And I guess threefold if you include the fact that all offseason the coaches have just been talking about how this is running back by committee.
He just got hurt too, so I'm just like, I don't even know if this running game is going to be good. And I don't know
the
if
problem.
Fields can throw it to him. And it's just like, dude, I just don't want any of the Jets, honestly.
I kind of just want to push Garrett Wilson really far down too.
Yeah, it's just like the Jets feel like the team that has the best skill position players that like that are going to underperform or aren't going to do well just because of how poor it's looking right now. So maybe I need to turn off the preseason info on them, don't get sucked into the training camp videos too much because, once the game changes. But I agree. They're on Hall. It's just hard to value them that high. All right. Next guy up is kind of a joke. Trevion Henderson. They have it running back 28. It's like, oh yeah, okay, dude, whatever you say. It's just way too talented, way too much draft capital, way too much camp hype to even consider burying that low. This one, again, feels like the most egregious one on Yahoo. They need to make an adjustment immediately.
Yeah, and it's just like, okay, like for the Omari and Hampton situation behind Najee before Najee's eye injury, it was like Najee's probably going to stay on the field and be more annoying because he like does the little things right and he doesn't fumble the ball. But Stevenson literally got benched last year because he fumbled it 6 times. And what has Henderson never done in his college career? Fumble the ball. He's also fast. He's also great at catching passes. I love this guy. He's a hyper target of mine. I was aggressive in the beginning, ranking him RB20, and I think I've kind of stood pat with that. But if I'm on Yahoo, I'm just making him a top priority. And I guess a little thing to note too, like just because you're drafting on these platforms and you think you're going to outsmart everyone, don't necessarily think that you're going to take RB24 because he's still going to be there at RB27. Like you're probably not the only guy in your league that like watched Ohio State. So just keep that in mind. Like you try to play the value, but don't push it too far.
Yeah, don't get cute. This is one where you're totally fine to draft him 2 rounds ahead of ADP on Yahoo. Like this is ridiculous. Like somebody in your league is going to draft him before running back 28. So yeah, like you said, don't think like, oh, maybe I can get RJ Harvey and Trevion Henderson. It's like, no, just go ahead and take Henderson. And hope that Harvey's the one that makes it back to you because he's the one that I'm less urgently looking for. I have been nothing but pushing Henderson up. I honestly want to push him up into that like Hampton and James Cook type of area. I'm just like there. I'm just like, okay, Kamara. Am I really going to be taking Kamara over this guy? I just feel like with Drake Maye and how ascending the offense is and how even for how much better their weapons have gotten, it still feels like he's the best one, and it's just like, okay, so I don't know. The hype train in my brain is getting out of control with Henderson and seeing him at 28. I borderline got offended. So.
And that tweet I sent you yesterday, that was like a pretty well-known, like, I don't know, reporter or journalist, he had like 400,000 followers or something. And it said
Jordan Schultz.
Yeah. It was like Trevion Henderson is not only fast, but other guys are saying he can catch passes and he's good in pass protection. My text message to you was like, has this guy been hibernating for like what
4 years?
What are you doing? Did you get hacked? Or is this like the lowest common denominator tweet of all time?
Yeah, my comment was maybe, guys, maybe it was for all the people just coming into the space, that hadn't heard of Henderson or something. Maybe he's getting a lot of who is this guy from clips he had been posting or had seen comments or something. That's the only explanation, because otherwise it makes no sense. I feel like it's worth mentioning on Trevion Henderson too. This is a guy that when he came into college football that you liked more than Bijan Robinson. So it's not like this guy was unknown or anything like that. This guy was a huge recruit, monster talent, just struggled a little bit with injuries in college. So, if he is able to stay on the field, there is nothing but upside here with Henderson. All right. And then the last two guys that we're going to go over are the two rookie tight ends. So we got Tyler Warren first, and he's going at tight end 14, which is great on that platform. Honestly, you just can wait till the end to take him as your tight end. I currently have him as tight end 8. I think he's for sure somebody that should be getting drafted. And so to see him at 14 is just like kind of an eye roll. And then same thing with Loveland at tight end 17, kind of just an eye roll there too, of just, he was just the 10th overall pick and you think that he's completely worthless in fantasy. I just don't know that I can agree there. We saw Cole Kmet be useful, and this guy is way better than Cole Kmet, even as a rookie, and I expect him to do big things in his first year there. There's no way Ben Johnson targets him at 10 overall and just kind of lets him get lost in the fold. That is just not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, both these guys were top 14 picks in the draft, and the tight end position isn't good, right? Like outside a few guys, and now we're seeing these first-year guys and second-year guys get better and better. Like Laporta was tight end 1, McBride's been a stud, like obviously Bowers last year. So it seems silly. So yeah, I would just wait until the last round too.
All right. And with that, thank you guys so much for watching. Talk to you in the next one.